Okay, good morning, everyone. I just want to say thank you again for being here today for our Going Beyond the Grant webinar. We are looking forward to sharing a lot of invaluable information and look forward to hearing from any of you that might have some questions or some extra thoughts to share as well. We always welcome the interaction. My name is Monique Norfolk, and I'm really happy to be with you all again. I'm thankful to the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization for inviting Mosaic Beginnings to participate in this capacity. So I wanted to share a little bit, just really quickly for those who are new, who we serve are these organizations, nonprofits, faith-based civic and government agencies. That's who we tend to work with. And we tend to provide a variety of services, which are capacity building services, because we do believe in ensuring that the organizations within our community are able to be sustainable. And so we are committed to that. This is just a little bit about Mosaic Beginnings. Just wanted to share that. Again, I'm honored that the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization has invited us to be here. The house rules, as always, please have your cameras on if possible. We know sometimes it's not possible, but we do want this to feel like a very engaging experience, and that really helps when we can see everybody who is participating. Please also use the raise your hand feature or the chat box to ask questions. And please, please, please interact. I love when people, actually do stop me, ask questions, or throw in something that's, you're currently experiencing, and we can, maybe see how we align what we're discussing with that. I know we only have 90 minutes, but we're going to definitely do the best we can to get through any and all questions and cover all of the material. I do ask that just so we have a wonderful experience for everybody and everyone on here is able to hear the information that's being shared, please remain muted unless you raise your hand. And then at that time, we'll have someone calling you and you'll be unmuted so that you can ask any questions that you want. Again, you can raise your hand at any time during the presentation. The plan for the day is that we're going to start with the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization with Board President Deanne Ferguson, who will be able to bring greetings and share a little information with you. Then we'll go through the webinar for the day. We also will just show you the password protected site, given that there's time. Either way, you will receive the password and the site to be able to log in so that you can access a wealth of tools and resources that are there. And there will be a survey as well, so you can assess how the webinar went, give us feedback, and that'll be sent with the follow-up email. With that, I would love to turn this over to Deanne.
Good morning, everyone. So glad that you all are here. Welcome. I hope that this will be beneficial to you. That is why we at the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization are doing this work and partnering with Mosaic Beginnings for this. So I want to share just a little bit. I'm not going to take a lot of time because I want Monique to be able to get into the meat of why we're really here. So the history, St. Louis Philanthropic Organization started in 1984. It began as a result of a lawsuit that the St. Louis City had against the cable company, and by the winnings from that lawsuit became the funding that the foundation uses to provide grants every year. Oh, and we've allocated more than $8 million since 1984 and continue to do so. All right, so you can see our mission statement, but ultimately what we're doing really is providing funding and capacity building to organizations in St. Louis. They can be in St. Louis City or St. Louis County, but they must be serving and advancing the quality of life for St. Louis City residents. These are our guiding principles. We want to ensure that the work that we're doing as board members with the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization is impact focused, in that we are partnering and funding organizations that are also impact focused. Same as far as being community oriented. We want to make sure that we are working with, and that the organizations we work with are also working with the community and not a for situation. So we are understanding our relationship, that we are part of the community and not outside of it. We have a strong commitment to ensuring that the funds that we grant are provided to organizations with a strong commitment to the work that they're doing as well. And so we're committed to doing this work, ensuring that we do it to the best of our abilities. We are, without a doubt, accountable. We're accountable for the funds that we received since 1984 that continue to build and grow. That is also our responsibility, to ensure that those funds build and grow so they will be here for a very long time, so that we can continue to provide funding to organizations like yours. In addition, we are also committed to racial equity, ensuring that the folks who usually are the ones who receive the least are receiving more, so that we can work to attain some equity, some racial equity in our city. And finally, respect. That is just a principle that we strongly believe in: respecting you, respecting your time, respecting your work, and having respect for the awesome responsibility that we have been given.
Thank you, Deanna. I really appreciate you. I love everything that the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization does. I'm always in awe when I'm, on social media and seeing everything you all are doing or communicating with you all. So it really is an honor to be a part of this work, and even just a small part, and hopefully make a sustained impact alongside you. Thank you so much. And if that is it from the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization.
Yeah, Monique, I just wanted to, if there are any other board members, I don't know if there are any other board members on the call. If Linda would like to if there's a staff on the call, that they would like to introduce themselves so that our guests can know who we are. And I just wanted to add too that so that you're clear that all of our board members are volunteers. Thank you.
Just to say good morning, my name is Linda H. and I manage the Philanthropic Office. Welcome and glad to see everybody in attendance today.
Thank you, Linda. Are there any board members or staff members on here that you see?
I thought I saw Darian.
Darian, I was saying, I saw our intern is on here.
Yes, good morning. How are you all doing?
Good.
It's nice hearing from you all, and I definitely look forward to the workshop, and I know it's going to be some valuable information.
Well, thank you so much, Darian. Appreciate you being here. Awesome. Well, thank you all. As I said, please jump in at any time if you have a question or thought you want to share. I'll go through. It's a lot of information, so I'm going to try to go through it as quickly as possible, but be as thorough as possible as well. And again, we'll always follow up with resources and things like that you all can access following the workshop. So that being said, okay, so what does going beyond the grant mean? This was a really intentional title, and I love always working with Linda as we're preparing for these, and we get really creative and excited. But this is intentional because oftentimes organizations are going after funding, and that's important. However, it's really only one piece of the puzzle. Funding doesn't necessarily allow an organization to be sustainable. And we know that these organizations, all of your organizations exist because there's a great need for them. So I'm thankful that the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization has seen fit to really pour into organizations and make sure that they're increasing your capacity so that you can be here for many years to come and continue to serve our community. When we're thinking about going beyond the grant, there are things like, there are funding sources that we want to consider, but we also want to consider other things like policies and procedures. We want to look at things like racial equity and how that's infused throughout your organization and throughout the work that you do. We want to look at collaborations and partnerships and evaluations. So many things that you all shared during the registration process were things that were really important to you. And because we are hopefully coming out of a pandemic, but we've been in a pandemic for the last couple of years, I saw that as a concern that many had. And I also know that that has forever changed the landscape of the work that we do. And so that's the lens that's going to be utilized. So you'll hear me refer to that quite often throughout the webinar, just because it's really essential that we look at this work in a way that we've never looked at it before, because we have to, or else we're going to be in the same position we were back in March of 2020. So the first thing I wanted to speak to as a result of that is something called VUCA. And as organizations are going through this, very uncertain time, it's important for us to look at that. The environment is really demanding, as you know, in the pandemic, that you react quickly to ongoing changes. They're unpredictable, things are out of your control. A lot of organizations were not well positioned for that because we've never focused on things that are more non-traditional in nature. And so now in the blink of an eye, we had to make sure we turned on a dime and put some things in place. We also know that things still remain uncertain, and from as it pertains to the pandemic now, but also as it pertains to where we're going in the future. We don't want to be in a space of angst, but we do want to recognize that at any moment there could be something else that's unpredictable. And so we have to be ready to take action without having that certainty that we're maybe used to relying on. It's also very complex, as we know, and we've seen throughout this pandemic in many different arenas. The environment is dynamic. It's constantly changing. There are so many different moving parts. And when we talk about interdependencies, it means that there are different things happening, whether it's across systems or in different communities with different people. Even within organizations, there are different things happening depending on what department you work for, but we're all connected. And so it's important that we realize that this is complex. We can't just take a one size fits all approach to this. So you'll hear me say, depending on your organization, or depending on who you serve, or depending on the situation, because it really is what it says here, ambiguous. There are some things that we can make very concrete, but we have to be able to apply whatever we learn through this webinar, as well as everything you've learned throughout the pandemic, to so many different situations. This is an unfamiliar territory for us. There are things that are going to be outside of our expertise, not only with the pandemic, but moving forward. And that's always been the case, but now we're having to focus more on that and be aware of it and be ready to kind of step outside of our comfort zone. And so VUCA just kind of reminds us that this is our reality, and it's not something that is abnormal for anyone. It's abnormal because we hadn't experienced it, but it's not abnormal for anyone at this point. We're all going through it. And organizations that are going to be strong, they're going to take VUCA and they're going to use that as a foundation for being able to build upon and be able to thrive during this season. So I want to just quickly say something about grants management. We talked about this in the grant writing webinar that was in December, so you guys can look at that for more detail, but I just wanted to tie it in. When you all do obtain grant funding, or with the grant funding you already have, it's important to look at that as not just in this moment for however long you're funded. It's looking at its impact on the program for which you were funded and on your organization's ability to be sustainable along the way. And the information you're tracking, we did a lot of talking about that, making sure you're capturing all of that is going to tell the story for future funding opportunities and for future opportunities to collaborate. It also tells the story of lessons learned. And so when we're thinking about sustaining the organization, it's important that we really take that information and we use it to propel our work forward and determine how we want to operate so that we are the most successful that we can be. The power of collaboration is something that I always talk about as well. For so long, we've operated in silo, and that doesn't work well. It doesn't serve our community well, and it doesn't serve our organizations well. We're not operating at the best capacity. We're not able to make the most impact that we could make as we propel the work towards our mission even further. And so collaboration is critical. We've seen that again in this pandemic. There was not one organization that could go it alone. No one had the resources to do something of this magnitude by themselves, whether it was money or people or any of the other resources that they had at their disposal. And so this is when we really learned that we could no longer operate and move on our own. We're all connected, and whatever happens to one organization or one community directly affects the others. So when I'm thinking about collaboration, there's so many directions that we can go with this, but I wanted to really focus on collective impact because that is something that traditionally has not been a focus. It's been something we've been moving towards over the last few years, but it's not something that the majority of organizations have adopted. More are coming on board, and again, we've kind of been pushed into that space where we must do it, but hopefully the mindset changes to when we want to do this and it becomes human nature and just common practice. So I just wanted to quickly look at this. I could have brought up different models of this, but I like this one for the webinar because it explains each one of these. It's so important that we do have a common agenda. And when we're talking about participants are not only those who are being served by our programs and our organizations. It's about the staff, it's about the board, the leadership, it's everyone that is impacted. We need to make sure that we're having a shared vision for change so that we can move forward together. We have to have a common understanding of the problem if we're going to be able to work together to solve it, or at least, move the needle towards solving it. And then we have to make sure that our approaches, even if they may be different, they need to be able to come together and blend so they really can make sure that there are actions that take place that our community can feel and really they're able to thrive as a result of that. Also, when it comes to data, that's something that I know people don't love talking about, but it's so important. And we need to have some shared measurements. And the thing is that we're all most of the time looking at different things, and they're all very important. So we need that information to inform our work. However, there should be some shared measurements no matter what our community organizations are focusing on, because we're still serving essentially the same people. So we need to see if what we're doing is making an impact and how, and then we need to see where the gaps are. That helps us to know where we can align as organizations. It doesn't mean your organization has to take on everything. It just means that your organization may identify an area that maybe you're not providing services or don't have the capacity to do that, but you know that there are others who do. So then this is an opportunity to collaborate with them. But if we're not, collecting that data and seeing how we can interlock our services, our programming, and really make a big impact, then that's something that we're missing. And that means there's a lot that our community members are missing. We also want to mutually reinforce activities. So the activities that are taking place may be different. I kind of look at it as an umbrella, and there's like raindrops. And so each of the raindrops may represent a different program. It may represent a different activity under one program. We can call them out distinctively. However, we need to realize that they do all connect with one another. So while we are implementing maybe 3 different programs, we are serving similar populations, if not the same people, and we need to see how that's impacting them. We need to look at how, if they have 1 or 2 of these services or participate in 1 or 2 of these programs, how are their lives being changed and impacted? And we want to continue to reinforce that plan of action across the board, making sure that we're all doing the same thing, which we know can be a challenge sometimes, but that's important when we're talking about sustainability. We need to be doing the same thing as much as possible so that we can make sure we're making a sustained impact. Also, continuous communication. We just want to make sure that whether it's with our board members, whether it's throughout the organization, between leadership and staff members, whether it's with our community, we need to continuously communicate. That's how we trust one another. That's how we ensure we're on the same page and moving in the same direction. And we continue to motivate one another. We stay, it's hard work that we're doing, so we want to make sure that we stay engaged and involved. And then also having that backbone support. Sometimes organizations don't have all of that within their own entity. So making sure that if you don't have it, there is some sort of backbone support where they can really look at all of this information, the data, look at the work that you're doing, and make sure that there is a collective impact, making sure that each of these organizations are able to serve alongside each other as, as their own backbone. So there can be a backbone organization that's helping to look across organizations at what's happening, but they're also able to say, hey, you guys are all working together. So this is how you can be a backbone for the entire initiative. Maybe you have this one piece of it, and then you have this piece, but collectively you're the structure that's in place to make sure our community members thrive. So with that, I also want to just quickly look at systems change, and I wanted to look at it more from a relational level. We know there are so many other aspects, policies and all of that are very, very important, and we want to be intentional about that. However, without focusing on the relational aspect of things, we really miss a lot. We can't move forward if we don't have people who have existing relationships, if we don't take the time to look at the things that maybe are below the surface that we need time to heal. We need to heal from, or we need to support our community members that are taking time to heal from that. And that drives the way that our programs and our organizations operate. We might have to move a little slower. We might have to do things differently because we want to respect that space of healing. We also want to make sure that we are looking not only at what we can see on the surface, but also, don't want to just look at the surface. We also want to look at what's happening inside of our own organizations, and what's happening in the systems around us that are impacting our organization. So there might be policies outside of what we're doing that are impacting us, or things that are happening with another organization that impacts us. Let's say they can't serve a certain population anymore. Well, that population may now become a part of the group that we're having the opportunity to serve. So we just really need to make sure that we're looking at all of this and what that means for our capacity, what that means for how we maybe need to shift things on our end. And the work needs to be deep. When we're talking about relationships, this isn't just surface, colleague. We really have learned through this pandemic, we have to get to know people for people. I've seen a lot more people sharing what they're really feeling, what's going on in their lives. We've obviously been in people's homes, but we're also hearing, when people are going through losses or people are having mental health challenges. That's not something that we should stop as we hopefully exit the pandemic. This is something we need to continue, because those deeper relationships, when we're seeing people as the true people they are, and not just a position, is what's going to help to propel the work forward. We also need to look at those things that are serendipitous. They just kind of seem like they happen, but when they happen, we need to take advantage of that and grab it by the horns and use that to help propel us forward. And there are things that we hold sacred. Sacred meaning it can be spiritual, or things that are sacred to a community simply because it's ingrained in their foundation. We need to make sure we are respecting that at all times in our work. And that's something that there are some organizations doing a great job of, and others have kind of come in, and like Deanna was saying, they're doing to instead of with the community. We really need to be focused on with. And that gets to this last part that is extremely important, which is transforming the power dynamics. This is literally like a shift in power. And that's where we make sure that community members, those that we have been serving, those that benefit from the services and programming that we provide, are at the table making decisions. They're not just there with us telling them what to do, they're informing our work. Perhaps we're the ones carrying out the work, but their voices need to be at the table, and not just for us to say we're hearing them. We really need to listen and use that lens, because that is what's going to keep us from being unprepared for the next situation that occurs. We're listening to them, and we're putting policies and practices in place that really provide the support that our community needs to thrive. I quickly will just share social determinants of health. As you can see here, it outlines multiple things, and it's kind of like, why are we talking about health? Well, this really gets at access. And when we're thinking about people within our organization, as we're going to talk about some things like within the infrastructure, we're going to need to consider social determinants of health, because we have colleagues that are at different levels, have different access, and we need to make sure that when we're thinking about different things, whether it's policies or how we interact with one another, we're considering all lenses and all perspectives in the work that we do. So that's very, very important. And it also matters as it pertains to the people that we have the opportunity to serve. But we just want to look at it as it's not, sometimes I think we just look at, we're helping people, and we're not really looking at the fact that we even are those people. And we really need to take a moment and think about how that impacts our ability to be sustainable as an organization. Agile is key. I love Agile, and that's because it really is focused on exactly what we need to move forward in uncertain times, and to really be as prepared as possible, so that, there were some organizations that were ready to just go when this pandemic happened. There were others that were scrambling, just trying to figure out, because they'd never had to consider operating differently, and there weren't maybe people in place to process things in that fashion. Thinking now about having an agile mindset is essential. And I thought about providing all of these different models. However, Agile covers so many different things. It covers evaluation, programming, the way that an organization is established, going after funding. There are so many different models for that. So really, I wanted to look at the fundamentals of what Agile is. Agile means having an organization that is able to be flexible and adaptable. That means making sure those pieces are in place already, so that when something does happen, you're able to easily just move into that space and be able to thrive. It doesn't mean there's not going to be any bumps in the road, but it should be a pretty smooth transition, because you've got all the right people in place, the policies, the resources, and all of that. An agile approach was actually birthed out of the IT sector, because what they do is they operate in teams. And so they have people that have diverse backgrounds, and they come together, they talk about whatever work they're going to be doing, and hear from perspectives that, are very unique to them. And so by getting all of these different lenses, they're able to put together a plan. And then what they do is they operate in these things called sprints. So it may be a 30-day sprint. We're going to try this. This is innovative. We've not done it before. We think this might work since nothing else has. Let's see what's happening. And we're going to check back in 30 days. But everybody's voice has gone into this plan. And at 30 days, everybody gets to speak up. They get to share what their experience was, what they think should happen, and they're all valued at the table. And that's what is really wonderful about this, is that there are so many different disciplines at the table, and that there's so much value in the people who are at the table. It's not about a hierarchy, it's really about a team. So I love that, and we will definitely dive more into that. When we are agile, it means that we can have so much impact on so many different levels. This, whether it's philanthropy, whether it's the nonprofit organization itself, whether it's policy changes, everything, anything that you can think of within the community, having an agile approach really makes an impact. And the great thing is that with agile, we are utilizing, less resources and making more of an impact. It may be that as you're shifting to this model, if your organization hasn't already, there's a little increase in cost. However, the idea is that we already have a lot of what we need, but we've got to tap into that and utilize it differently so that we can make sure we're operating as we should. And then we're able to make a more significant impact. At the end of the day, it's not all about dollars. And so that's something that I definitely want us to think about, is that it's really about, if we're tracking everything as we're supposed to, we're seeing that there's an impact and we're sustaining that, then is essentially we're going to start shifting to a space where, yes, we always will need money, but it's not going to just be about the money. It's more about resources and all of that we're going to need. And that's something that can happen by collaborating and through some other mechanisms as well. The benefits, just these aren't all of them, but more effective campaigns, whether that's campaigns to raise awareness about your organization and your programs, or campaigns to solicit funding to support what you're doing. It's also an opportunity to expand your programs, because now you're becoming aware of resources that already existed that you may not have been aware of and been able to then tap into. It's also about greater team unity and collaborative growth. We talked about everyone's voice mattering and being at the table. We talked about working together, and we talked about also making sure that people feel valued. When you feel valued, you're naturally inclined to come together and want to see how we can work together and make things happen. And at the end of the day, we're always focusing on who we are serving and what our purpose is. And so the better we can work together within the organization and across organizations, the better our community members are going to be able to live. That's essentially the point, is we want to close those gaps and remove those barriers that they've been experiencing. This also results in what's called a flatter organizational structure, and that's because it is not a hierarchy approach. With this, there's still, your senior leadership. However, as I mentioned, those teams that were in IT, if we look at it from a nonprofit sector, the teams could be the president and CEO is in a team with an IT person, one of the social workers or case managers, also administrative assistant, and program manager. And so all of these people are a part of this team, and they are tasked with addressing this aspect of what's going on with the organization. We have people with so many different lenses, and not only based on their titles, but based on their lived experiences as well, and so many other skill sets that maybe their titles don't allow them to use, but they have. This way, we are getting a really broad range of ideas, range of thoughts and perspectives that help to shape the work that we do moving forward. And essentially, people from our community should be a part of this conversation as well. So now we're all on a level playing field. We know we have to have people in certain positions to make decisions, but that hierarchy level or approach was really not benefiting our community, and it wasn't benefiting these organizations. So we've got to make that transition, and it's going to be easier for some organizations than others, but it's important that we start moving that way. Also, we know that we've had to be innovative during this time, and we're going to have to be innovative in the future. If things are not working that we've tried, and it seems like, this is the approach we should take, but it's not working, then let's be open to some ideas from someone that maybe is considering something that's non-traditional. The beauty of Agile is that they are doing those sprints. So when we're trying something innovative, we're trying it for a short period of time. We're seeing, is it working? Is it seeming promising? Are there things we need to tweak? And then we can continue to do that and make sure that we move that work forward so that, again, we're better serving our community. I'm not calling out a lot of different assessments. I will reference some throughout this, but I did want to start off by saying it's so important to assess organizational capacity across different levels, because as we're trying to move into this agile function, we need to know what we're already working with. What is the current landscape of our organization? What are things, our areas that we need to grow in? And so you see on the right side of the screen, it says adaptive capacity. Again, not every organization is going to be at the same place, but we need to look at what is our ability to monitor what's going on. That's essential. How can we then look at that and assess it and say, okay, this is how we need to respond to it. And then are we able to create internal changes? That might be policy changes. It may be that we are just, putting those teams together so that we can better operate as a cohesive team. And there may be some external changes. So we know that what happens with one organization impacts us. We know there may be some policy changes that impact us. Do we have people or partners who have the collective ability to help us make those changes? Leadership capacity. And this leader needs to be one that is fully bought into that agile approach. Do they have the ability to create and sustain a vision, to inspire people to move towards this type of work and this approach? And are they able to model it? And by modeling it, this means that as they are doing the things like prioritizing, making decisions, providing direction, they're doing that by being informed by other people. They're not just saying, I'm a leader, I'm making this decision. They're being informed by community members, by staff members at all levels. And they're really valuing those voices and using that to ensure they're making the best decision for the organization. It's also important to make sure that they are committed to innovation. So many organizations are doing the same thing, but what's going to set your organization apart? And what's going to make sure that your organization is doing that one thing that does make sure that it's able to be sustainable? It's really important. We're working towards that mission consistently, which means that we have to evolve as the world evolves. We can't stay in the same place. The St. Louis Philanthropic Organization was founded in 1984. They're not operating the same way they did then because they have to change. Of course, they still have the same accountability, same commitment to the community, but they're evolving to make sure they're meeting the needs of the community. And as an organization, they're continuing to make the shifts that they need to make so they can be stronger. Management capacity. This is not just about roles. It includes roles as far as managers and as far as people that are being managed. However, it's also about being able to use the resources that we have effectively and efficiently. We mentioned that there are resources we may not be aware of, and we need to be able to tap into those resources and say, hey, this person has this skill set that I didn't know they had, and we really could use that with this program that's been lacking that. Let's see if there's some synergy there and make that happen. It's just really about being intentional, and that's the whole approach of agile, is to make sure that we are operating in a way that is effective and efficient, because then as the unexpected happens, we're not so thrown off guard and we're able to better serve our community. We also want to look at technical capacity, which is similar to what is happening here today. It's really looking at the skills and the experiences, different tools that we have, what knowledge do we already have, or what are we missing? And then how do we go about getting that so that we can thrive? Excuse me. It's really important. It's also good to look at what tools do we already have in-house, and are we using them to their maximum capacity? I've seen a few times, even recently working with organizations, where they have some really great tools, they're just not using all of the functionality. And so they're still kind of scrambling and struggling and honestly stressed out. And that's not what we want. And so we want to make sure that we take a good look at that. Do we have the technology that we need to be able to really operate efficiently in 2022? If we don't, how can we get it? And sometimes it's not about funding. There are, ways that we can get some of the technology needs met because you're a nonprofit organization. And so we just want to look into all of our options and make sure that we do that. But all of these things are needed so that we can implement the programs, we can implement the organizational and community strategies as well. And so then I want to get into what about the people? And so that covers several different aspects. When we're thinking about the people in the organization, again, we're taking this team approach. It's a team mindset, and that's across levels. And there's also a need to make sure that it's not only a team approach, but also that we're utilizing certain voices at all levels. That's the huge part. That community piece is essential. When we're saying we are operating with our community, that means that they literally do have a voice at all of the tables. Everybody may not be at the table, but there should be representation, significant representation at the table. When we're talking about a strong organizational leader, it's going to look different depending on your organization. It's going to look different depending on where your organization is now and where you need to go. So that's going to determine the type of leader that is going to be best, or leaders that are going to be best for your organization. When we're looking at certain things, we're looking at characteristics such as, are they people? Like, do they like people? Are they empaths? Because at this point, really what's important is that people know that not only are they valued for what they bring to the job, but also are they valued as a person. We have lives outside of the jobs that we do, and we want to know that that matters as well. It doesn't mean you have to know our whole life story, but just know that maybe we have a family member that is sick and we need to take care of them, or maybe we need you to be flexible with us when it comes to working remotely, or, you know, coming in the office or leaving at a certain time. It's just, we need someone who's going to be in leadership, or persons who are in leadership that are going to think about all of these things and think about the policies and how they impact everyone, because traditionally these policies, intentionally or unintentionally, have impacted minorities disproportionately. And minorities can be as in the racial aspect, or it can also be in abilities. So when we look at if certain people may have different disabilities, if we're writing policies and we're not considering all of the people that we are serving, and by serving, I mean within our organization, these are people we're serving, because we need them there. So we need to make sure we're focusing on meeting their needs. Are we considering all of their different needs? And you know what? You can't do it if you don't have them at the table. Oftentimes it's people who are well removed from this community that are making decisions. And so we need to have people that are staff members that are part of that conversation when we're developing policies. We need to have people that are members of the communities we're serving, or maybe even caregivers for the community members we're serving. We need to have them at the table so we're making the best decisions. And a good leader is going to be one who is able to adapt, who is flexible, who's open, who welcomes feedback and guidance, and really is looking to be innovative wherever possible, even if the idea doesn't come from them. They're just open to the idea of being innovative and seeing how we can move forward. And they're open to empowering people. That's a big thing, is empowering and encouraging and inspiring those who work around us. I mean, who doesn't want to work in an environment like that? But it takes a strong leader, a strong leadership team to make sure that that happens. And then when we're building our team, you know, this can be building your team as this is a newer organization and you're establishing a team, but it also can be that you're building the team. We're building those teams under the agile approach. It's also just building a sense of team, like that energy within your organization should be a team focused, team centered one. And we know that that may be an easy shift for some, and for others, it may take a while, but really working to getting to that point is essential for some of the things that I saw people asking about, whether it was recruitment or retention. This is going to be huge. Do people feel like they're part of a team or a family, essentially? And that's up to, you know, your organization to make sure that happens. When we're thinking about building the team, I definitely wanted to respond to some of the concerns that exist for so many, especially right now. Recruitment's always been a challenge, but it's been so much more difficult as a result of the pandemic. I know that just filling pretty much any position is a challenge. And so when we look at recruitment, we need to look at it a little bit differently. It's going to have to be non-traditional. It's going to have to be like thinking outside of the box. And that, again, is where having all of these different lenses is going to be essential. So having people who maybe haven't even been in leadership before is going to be essential. Having people who have varying backgrounds, from business to social work, public health, the arts, whatever it is, like, it's important to have everyone at the table that you can, within reason, to have the conversation about what they think you should do, because this is a time to do something you've never done before. Some things are going to be, you know, looking at different organizations. So I think I automatically go to Black Greek letter organizations, looking at those organizations and saying, hey, you all have a variety of people who are in so many different spaces. We'd like to get this information to you because you touch so many more people, and we want to see how we can utilize your, you know, I guess collaborate. I don't want to say capitalize on that, but you get what I mean. We want to make sure that we're able to utilize what you already have in place as a system and as a partner to help us like move this vehicle forward and be able to get quality candidates. And you figure out what that looks like. Is it them sharing the job description? Is them saying, hey, we know of some people and we will make sure we, you know, have a warm handoff of people that we share with you that you can then consider for the open positions. I think also is very essential. And, you know, think about like NAACP. There are so many organizations out there, and it really depends on what community you're serving. You do want to be intentional about getting people from the community at all levels. It doesn't matter whether it's executive leadership. It doesn't matter if they are a staff person in program management, administrative assistant. We want to make sure that as much as possible, these people are coming from the community, being served, or at least have some type of connection and strong affinity for it, because that's going to drive the work that they do within your organization and add to the strength of your organization as well. So that's essential. And then also the one last thing I want to say about this recruitment piece that I think we really have to do differently now is think about transferable skills. And I know people have talked about that for a long time, but one thing I sat with this and I was like, what is a good example? I think it's good, you might not, but I'm gonna share it. I thought about if we have a teacher and we have a program manager position we need to fill. We have we're trying to manage a team. We really have just not been having a good outcomes. Well, maybe you're not typically going to be looking for a teacher because the job description calls for certain skill sets and background. But what we need to realize is, number one, I thought of teachers because they're leaving schools at an alarming rate because of burnout and because of so many other reasons. And practices that were in place well before the pandemic that weren't okay, but now are really having an impact on them, they're leaving. But that's not all that they bring with them. They have skills outside of what they've learned in teaching. But if you think about this too, from that management standpoint, they've been through so many trainings that have taught them how to collaborate with one another. And they've had to operate in that way where they do depend on one another so much, in a good way, a good, healthy way of leaning into each other's skill set and strengths. And then they've also learned how to operate with leadership at different levels. They also have done a lot of classroom management. And while we are not necessarily working with children, these are adults, they're still transferable skills. And they may need to learn some more from the nonprofit side, but they bring some very invaluable experiences and approaches that we could consider. So that's just something I wanted to bring up, is that we might be looking for someone with a certain degree, certain background, had certain titles and work experience, but we very well could utilize someone in this who comes as a teacher that actually can maybe do a better job than somebody who's done the work before, because they're able to think about it differently. So I just wanted to bring that out as something to utilize as you guys are thinking about this recruitment process. During the hiring process, I know there are interviews and there are different types of steps that organizations are having people take. One that more organizations are doing across the board, it's not been widely adopted, but highly recommended, is behavioral assessments, because now people are realizing it's not just about your skill set. It's really about, are you a good fit for our organization? Are you that missing piece of the puzzle? And so we want to look at those things that are beneath the surface that they may not even be aware of. So we can start looking, maybe they sound really, really great in their interview, but then you see through the behavioral assessment, they're really not that committed to the mission. They could care less. That's something you want to know. You don't want to bring someone like that into the organization where they're just there doing the work. And unfortunately, we focus so much on titles and credentials and all of that. And not that there's no value, there's value, but there are people who have that and they get in and their heart really isn't committed to the work. And we need heart when we're doing this type of work. We need people who are committed to bringing in different connections and all of that. So that's just a really important part of the hiring process. And I think you'll find that you have a stronger team. And I always say, I know you'll find that you'll have a stronger team. And as an organization, your infrastructure is going to be even greater, and you're going to be able to sustain the work for longer. And so that gets to retention. People who are in an environment where they know they're valued, they're going to stay longer, where they know that they fit, they're going to stay longer. But also when we're thinking about retention and even recruitment, I'm going to kind of tie those together. We need to say what makes your organization stand apart. People are leaving jobs because of how they've been treated during the pandemic. Their mental health hasn't mattered. Their family needs haven't mattered. They don't have the benefits they need, or the flexibility and all of that. And so the same thing that you're going to use to recruit them and draw them in that says we're different, you want to work with us, is going to be the same thing that helps you retain them. And so it's important to really think from that mindset instead of just being like, be glad you're here. Really, organizations need to be glad that they have people there, because this is not an environment where people are jumping to come to work for a good reason. They're tired. And so we want to provide the best experience for them so they stay. And we want to make sure that we're also increasing their capacity. So work like this, making sure that your team, if there are skills that are missing or areas where your team members want to grow, make sure that you offer them that opportunity. There'll be free ones and there'll be some that cost, but make sure that you expose them to that, because they're likely to stay with you if you do that. I wanted to also look at, what's in a board. Now, I won't go too deep into this because we have an entire webinar on March 9th that's going to tap into this and go much deeper. But I just wanted to touch on it a bit because it is very important. So the board is the backbone of your organization. And we know that boards are set up in different ways. So we want to respect that. Again, this is one of those things where it's going to be depending on how your organization is established that drives this. We want to look at, these are just a few questions and things to consider, but what does your organization need to be successful and make a significant, whatever significant is for your organization, a significant sustained impact? unfortunately, there's been so much, start and stop. And when we know community members need us and need what we're providing, we want to make sure that we sustain the impact so that more people are able to, whether it's get out of a situation where they are living in poverty or they're unemployed. Now, we want them to be able to get out of that part of their lives and be able to thrive. And we want to be able to help more people come along as well. And then continue to support them along the way, whether that's connecting them to other organizations or continuing to maintain a check-in process where they go through life things just like we all do. And we're able to maybe help them with that so they don't end up back in the same situation. So let's think about what that sustained impact looks like. What skills are needed? We don't know all the time what skills we need because we haven't stopped to really think about it. Like, do we have everyone at the table? Maybe because of COVID, you guys have identified that we don't have these people at the table, or we're not, or maybe we have them and they have the background, but this person who's a part of our team doesn't have all the skills associated with that to be as successful. So then you don't just throw the person away, you provide them opportunities to strengthen those skills so that then they become stronger, they feel valued, they know they're valued, and your organization is stronger. So, and then also, whatever we are missing, that's where we also want to make sure we look at our board members and ensure that we put those skills at the table. Oftentimes it's just like, okay, let me get a certain number of board members because I need them. Well, that's not helping us be successful because then they fall off, they're not engaged, they really don't even understand why they're there. So we want to make sure we're clear on why they're there. We're filling gaps where skills are needed. If there may be someone you need that writes grants, or you might need an attorney or something like that, make sure that whatever those needs are that you couldn't readily pull in and maybe pay for, you have those people at the table, even if they're providing guidance and expertise, that's invaluable. And that's something we want to track. I always talk about tracking in-kind time. I know the board for the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization is volunteer. Well, that's still their hours, there's expertise, there's money tied to that. These people have backgrounds that are extremely significant. And if there was a job description, which we should have some kind of job description for your board members, if there's a job description, there are dollars tied to that. I'm sorry about that. So we want to make sure that we are focusing on that. And that's what's going to help you build a strong board. We also want to look at what types of partnerships are critical. Again, funding is important. So we know that there are some aspects of the board that, require, hey, if you've got connections to people that can get us money, please do that. But that's not the only thing, because again, funding is not going to sustain your organization. There are all these other pieces. Are there existing partnerships that they may have or relationships they have? And when you look at everything you all are doing, those partnerships are critical to your organization's work. If that's the case, let's tap into that. That's super important. And we want to make sure that we utilize, again, that human capital, not just looking at the finances, so that we can make sure we're stronger, strong as can be. I think sometimes we've tended to value finance over, the other invaluable skills or resources that board members may bring. And it's not one or the other, it's both. And one person may have no money to bring to the table, but they may bring so much value because of all the connections they have, all the knowledge and expertise they're willing to share. Let's value that just as much, if not more, because without funding, we still need all of that in order to be successful. Personalities are critical in determining progress. So just as we're looking at personalities of people we want to hire, we need to be assessing the personalities that we're bringing into our board. Are we going to be able to work well together? Is your mission aligned with, or is your heart aligned with the mission of this organization? That's essential. There are some board members, some people that are just not meant to be board members for your organization. And please make that call as you need to, because again, it impacts our community at the end of the day. It keeps things from getting done. It creates an environment that is not welcoming and doesn't help us produce. And so we want to be considerate of that. And again, being agile is essential. Having a board that is open to that agile mindset and approach is going to be critical, because when we come up against, something else that we don't expect, we've got to have them supporting us too. We don't need a roadblock in being able to serve our community and make some changes that we need to make and be innovative. And maybe it fails, who knows? But if we don't have anything else to go off of, we've got to be able to try something. We've got to have a board that's supportive. And so there's something that as leaders and as members of the organizations, we have to do. So speak with your board members. Each of you should share your whys. Why are you a part of this organization? What do you hope to get from this experience? What do you want to give? What is the alignment here? And it'll help see from different perspectives. Like, maybe I thought you were in this realm and you're here. Well, that lets me know how I should interact and engage with you, and what I maybe need to pull out and focus on more, because you bring some strengths there that I wasn't aware of. It's important also to co-lead. And that means from that strong leader that we described, they need to co-lead with the board. They need to be a team, essentially. It's not, us against them. We are a team. It doesn't mean that the board has to make every single decision. It doesn't mean that the leader makes every decision. Let's come together and see things from each other's perspective and be able to work together to move the work forward. We want to keep our board informed. They don't need to be involved in the day-to-day. I know there are some organizations where that happens and it ends up being a challenge, quite honestly. So we want to make sure they're informed, whether it's something good or bad that happens. The good could be that we share this with them and they're really, really happy. They invest even more, whether it's financially or their time, or they say, well, I know someone else or another organization that can help you even more with this. But at the same time, sharing with them things that aren't so great, they may have some resources to support that, but also let them know we're on top of it. And them seeing you all be able to overcome those challenges will be essential in building trust and really strengthening that relationship. Engage them. They should be at different community events you have. They don't need to be the face. They just need to be present. And that's because they can see your work in action. They can see your community members and get to know them, because those are the most valuable people. I think, they're undervalued a lot. And so I'm seeing organizations that are really positioning community members at the forefront, and I love it. And seeing more of that is going to be essential. And they then get to understand why we're doing the work we're doing and where the community members are coming from. And that may inform the work that they do as your board, because now they have a better understanding that they can only get from being fully present with them. It's also important to establish personal relationships. A lot of times it's transactional when it comes to a board and organization. But remember, like we said, we're all people. We have lives outside of this work. It doesn't mean you have to tell your deepest, darkest secrets, but learn about what matters to them. Learn about who they are. What have they been through? They may have some lived experience you didn't know about, but it directly aligns with the work you all are doing, or it may be that you all find alignment because you've been through similar things. Once you have that human connection with someone, that impacts the work tremendously. So it's important that we're intentional about establishing those relationships going forward if we've not already done that. Then establish goals. You've learned all this information. Let's establish goals together as to how we want to move forward. And then we're going to provide that strategic direction. And since we have done this collaboratively, there shouldn't be as much of that tug and pull. It doesn't mean there never will be, but it should move a lot more smoothly because our approach is a lot different. This is just I threw everything out here that needs to be evaluated. So we have to consistently evaluate the organization, our programs, employees, board, and constituents. There should always be an opportunity for feedback, whether it's that you're intentional about creating safe spaces to come and have conversations, or if you are actually, saying, hey, here's an anonymous way that you can submit this information. Make every attempt to ensure that there are as many opportunities for feedback as possible, and that we're not just getting the feedback, but we're actually listening to it and receiving it. We know that everything that we hear is not necessarily what we're going to move forward with, but we should be intentional about making sure that we do move forward with things as much as possible and have conversations about how we should move along with that. We can talk about, hey, we heard all of this. We're noticing we need to make some changes here. We didn't know this was going on. Thank you for bringing this to our attention, and we're going to address it. Let us know if there are some things you think we should do in addressing this. Or we receive this information is really valuable. At this point in time, we can't move forward because it's really important that we're as open as possible, because that does build that trust. It keeps people from feeling like their voices aren't heard. They understand that, yes, my voice is heard, but maybe right now is not the time. It doesn't mean never. So just being as open as possible is really another key part of sustainability. But this evaluation piece does let you know right away what's going on. So if you need to course correct, you can, or if you see something going really well, you can beef up support on that end as well. So racial equity is something that we, talked about before, and I am wanting to make sure we go a little deeper. Promoting racial equity is key. And when I say promote, it's not just saying it, it's really making sure that it is every part of your organization's work and just anything that you do. And so I just like to point out, because it matters, that racial equity is defined as an outcome and a process. And as an outcome, we're going to achieve racial equity when race no longer determines one's socioeconomic outcomes, when everyone has what they need to thrive no matter where they live. So we talked about those social determinants of health. This is where that comes in. There shouldn't be an issue with access just because you're a certain race. It shouldn't matter, that you should not be able to access jobs or food or healthcare. And so that's what we're all doing in our work, is making sure that our community members have better access. But I also wanted to point out that a lot of times we need to realize that it's not just our community members. There are colleagues of ours who could very well be the people that we're serving as well. So they're in these same situations. So when we're thinking about things like policies, we're thinking about, just so many different things as far as how our organization is going to operate moving forward, being agile, being really considerate of those that are members of our team. Let's think about the fact that those we work with are literally in the same situation. And think about the fact that what the pandemic showed us is that any one of us could be in that situation too, even if we aren't right now. So when we think with that lens, we approach things differently. As a process, we apply racial equity when those who are most impacted by the structural racial inequity are meaningfully involved in the creation and implementation of institutional policies and practices that impact their lives. What that means is what we talked about already, that people who are impacted by the work that we're doing need to be at the table. So those structural decisions, when we're deciding to change policies and procedures, and we're deciding to maybe shift things as it pertains to programming, all of that, these are people who need to be at the table because they bring a different lens. And we're going to continue to do the same thing we've done, which has not been effective, if we don't have their voices at the table to inform our work. And again, it may not be intentional, but we don't know what we don't know. So what we do know is that there are people who have experienced this and should be at the table. Again, whether they're a caregiver, whether they're directly from the community, or they, have done a lot of work with this community, so they have such a significant affinity for them and understanding of what's needed. We need heavy representation, not just one person. It should be heavy. We do need the other lenses from people that aren't from this community because they bring some insight that we may not have considered. And so we all work together, but we definitely need to have that voice at the table. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck again with structural structures and systems that really don't work for those who have been most disadvantaged. So when I talk about infusing racial equity, these are just some things, it's not all of it, but I'm thinking about those policies and procedures. We know there's the Crown Act, we're thinking about the impact on, people's thoughts about our hair and how we show up, and is that professional? We think about, does everyone have the same ability to do a job without supports? And so when we're thinking about different job descriptions and saying that this policy is going to drive this decision, we need to make sure that we're not excluding people who could still very well do the job, but maybe need some supports to do it. We want to make sure that we're thinking about people who have families, whether it's their children or they have parents or whoever else that they're taking care of. Can they take care of them? Are these policies prohibiting them from that, making them feel like if I don't come to work, I'm going to lose my job? Are we flexible with when they can come and when they can't? Because when we're thinking about access, if I have to take public transportation and it takes me 2 hours, I have to switch buses and all of that, as well as drop my child off at childcare early in the morning and then do it all again and go get my child late at night, then my situation is not the same as somebody who's going to be able to just jump in their car and get there in 20 minutes. And so we really need to be conscientious of that when we're developing these policies and procedures. People who are in the most marginalized groups need to be at the table, and they need to say why or why not why this makes sense or why it does not. So that's important. And we need to think about the fact that there are structures in place that really have impacted minority communities, and specifically I would say Black communities. So we need to be intentional about recognizing that it's been exacerbated, it's been highlighted now by COVID-19. Some people said they didn't know somehow, but now we all know, so we got to do something about it. We need representation at all levels from that community. That means executive leadership, that means on our board, that means staff, it means everyone. We need representation from that community, whatever that community is, and we need to be intentional about it. That representation also needs to show up in our partnerships. If we are, and so I want to step back with the board and leadership. There are, multiple organizations that are, white led, and yet they're serving, majority Black communities, and the heart is there. However, the knowledge of what those communities really need isn't there. And so we need to make sure that we're shifting that, and we're making sure that these community members are at that table and they're represented and their voices are heard in driving this work. So that's what I'm thinking about with this. And I've seen some organizations do that really, really well over the last few years, and it's encouraging. You just see the entire model shift, and you see the work actually make such a significant impact. And they start doing things that maybe sounded crazy to someone because they'd never heard of it, and didn't see how it could work, but then it's working and it's thriving and community members are better off because of it. So we just definitely want that. And then with partnerships, I think about people from those communities, depending on who you're serving. We shouldn't come in with only who we think. We may know of some services and resources, but we need to make sure that these are trusted entities within that community. And by being intentional about collaborating with them, that's going to continue to increase trust. And it's also going to expand our ability to, serve our community at a greater level. I also wanted to bring up certifications. It's not a requirement, but when we really want to, again, stand out as an organization, when you're looking at recruitment, you're looking at retention, you're looking at getting additional funding, getting additional partners, there are certifications out there. There's so many of them that I couldn't put them all here. I have one example I want to use, but we want to make sure that we're looking into some of those that maybe will kind of step up our game and help people see what we really stand for. So I wanted you all to just consider that. And one example of that, well, I'll get to that in a second. One example is an MLT certification, but I think that's the next slide. So when I look at racial equity in practice, this is here because this is literally where we should see racial equity infused across the board. And even in evaluation, sometimes we're developing different evaluation tools and approaches. And, I've said before, like, evaluation is not just a survey. There's so many different ways we can do that. It's got to fit for your community, your organization. But even in evaluation, the way a question is asked is going to, it has implications that may impact, it being an equitable question for a certain race or certain group. So we need to make sure that we have people looking at all of this as we're developing it, so that we can't get to 100%, but as best as possible, we're meeting the needs. So we're looking at all of this, even with our training, our education, our programming, we need to make sure that everything includes a racial equity focus. I see people, our organizations having like DEI training, and that's great, but then it sits there. How do we infuse this into every part of our being? That's when we're really taking a racial equity approach. And that's what's really going to make a change. We can't just have one thing over here. We can't even say that policies exist, and that's important. And then but it's in silo, and then in programming, we're doing this, and that's in silo, and training is this. It all has to weave in together. So that's essential. And that's something, again, it's going to take time. It's not like it's going to just happen overnight, but as long as we are intentional about it, we can put a plan in place to take a phased approach and make sure that this happens. So this is the example that I wanted to share. This is the scoring rubric that's used for that certification that I was mentioning. And what I like about this is that they look at this, like they look at everything. They said Black representation at every level. So everything we talked about, making sure that whether it's the board of directors, senior management, middle management, professionals, the entire organization, there's Black representation, because that's the focus of this, is Black equity. Compensation equity. There's so many inequities between Black and white employees. The data shows that it's always been that way. We can close the gap. And that's about being intentional, looking at, sometimes people have different access to experiences. And so we don't want to make it that because you didn't have access, you then don't deserve this compensation. How can we make sure that they are receiving equitable compensation and even the equitable training they need, if they need that to get to that point? We're providing that, and that the benefits and everything are equitable. And let me say this, equitable means that it's not always the same. Equitable is meeting people where they are. Each person's needs are different. Each person's situation is different. So when we're looking at compensation, we need to be more fluid in that. We know there have to be some things that are concrete, but we can, we should be moving, as we're thinking about agile, moving more towards a model that the benefits that this person may need look quite different from this person's. And it doesn't mean that, we just stay with that traditional model of this is what we offer, because if the deductible is $6,000 and, I'm making $20,000, that's not equitable. That's not going to work for me. So let's see what we can do to make sure that, or if I have a kid who's in daycare from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m., maybe we need to think about adjusting work hours and adjusting supports for that family so that they can, cover those costs, but also maybe have more family time and more balance, because we are also thinking about their mental health and making sure that we're looking at that whole person. An inclusive anti-racist environment. So, making sure that these Black employees feel like they belong, they're valued, and they can advance. And we know that oftentimes that doesn't happen. And so I love that with the certification, when they're scheduled, they're scoring, they're looking at all of this. So you can't just say we're doing it. They want to see, how are you doing it? How intentional are you? How do we know that this is something sustained? And are we hearing from people that they actually do feel this? They're not just an example that we're using, we have a face, they're actually valued as they should be. And then racially just business practices. That's, oftentimes in organizations, practices change depending on who we're interacting with. And so making sure that we are intentional about those practices, about who we hire, different vendors, whether it's the company that cleans the building, or it's the company we get all of our food from for our lunchroom, all of that. Are we being intentional about spending money with, in this case, Black businesses, and making that effort? That's important. It's not going to just fall in your lap. We're going to have to be intentional, because also they don't have the same access. And then also the last thing here is racial justice. So contributions and investments. Are we really investing back in that community? Are we investing in those businesses that are in that community? Are we investing in, and that's not just financial. Are we providing in-kind services that we have? If we know they need legal services or accounting services, whatever it is, are we being intentional about investing in those communities and providing that so that they can thrive and they're not constantly experiencing this gap? So just wanted to give this example of a certification that calls for that. But once you have it, they are very well known and very respected across the country. And this will definitely set you apart when you're looking forward to being sustainable and to getting additional funding and additional partnerships. This is literally the way to go. Let's see. So diversification of funding, and I am keeping an eye on the time. Diversification of funding. So there are multiple things we can consider. I'm not going to cover everything. I don't think that's possible. But again, innovation comes to mind. We've got to be innovative. Having all of those people with different lenses at the table is going to be essential. Grants are only one part. So yes, continue to look for additional grant funding, but don't let that be your only funding. There are different, approaches. Some are, even having a fee for service model. And so looking at entities, maybe it's a school district, maybe it's government agency, they need the programming and the services you have, but they don't have the capacity for it, or they may not have an organization may not have that investment in the community where they're trusted to provide that. Well, that's where they can contract with your nonprofit and you get that paid for. So you're still getting grants and you're providing services to community members, but now you're being intentional about collaborating with these entities and having contracts. So you have this constant stream of income from these different entities so that you're able to fund the work that you're doing. And you're able to just keep that going and reach more people, essentially, making more of an impact. Also, obviously, selling items that will provide funding, but you got to be intentional about what you develop, what you, who your target audience is, and what messaging is going to matter to them, what types of items are going to really be beneficial to them. Think about all of that, and then take that approach. There was one more that is not crossing my mind right now, but it's really important. I do have one model that I will focus on though, but there was one more that I thought of that is escaping me. But just making sure that you're thinking outside of the box with this. And also, using social media. I think that was another piece I wanted to mention. Social media is really critical. It's critical to continue to get your story out there. So as different impacts are happening in the lives of community members or in the community at large, share that story, because the more people see it, the more people are thinking about your organization. They're learning about what you do. They're becoming more invested. They're kind of seeing, where do I fit in? And you're telling them where they can fit in. But then also that helps with individual donors, but also those larger entities. Like, we want to make sure we're aligning with which I'll get to that, we're aligning with their mission and their vision. But when you do that, you're actually positioning the organization to get even more funding. I wanted to also speak again to capturing in-kind dollars. The time the volunteers provide, it can be monetized. There's a site that, if I have not previously shared it with the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization for the password protected site, we will make sure that you guys have that on there. And what it does is it looks at volunteer hours and looks at what all of their skill set is, what that would look like as a job, and it turns it into dollars. Funders want to see that. They want to see if there's this level of investment. Those dollars do count. And even if you're going for federal funding, there are times when they want a match, and that match can be in-kind dollars. So it's, just looking at all of that is going to be essential. And also, don't rely solely on funding and dollars. I want to go back to collaboration. I talked about how everybody is connected. We talked about the collective impact. It's really important that we are looking at what other organizations are providing and seeing how we can work together. We don't need to oversaturate the market by continuously adding on new services that already exist somewhere else and maybe are being underutilized. Let's go ahead and see how we can collaborate and fill those gaps by working together. And then we make a wider impact, and they can utilize your services as well. So let's just think about that. And that's why early on I said, it's not necessarily the funding that sustains you. If you're doing the work, you're seeing the changes and the impact, and it's sustained, you're going to be able to continue to sustain that work by just continuing to build on making sure you get those resources. And it's not always going to be in the form of money. It's going to be in the form of someone else having those resources that they're able to then utilize for the population you're serving, and vice versa, because it's a two-way street. So that is important. I really like this enterprise funding model. Enterprise is really focused on, again, it's minority, but the Black community. And that's because we're looking at the fact that routinely there's not access to a lot of the capital that other communities may have, yet there's also not access to a lot of the things that are needed. So essentially you have this organization right there in the middle that's providing the services, a nonprofit organization or a social enterprise. They're providing these services. However, we have funding coming from, foundations, social impact funds, all of that. And then we're making sure that we are meeting the needs of a societal issue. The thing is, these people over here care much more about what is going to happen here. And so the story isn't about throwing every single thing you do at them. It's about being strategic and saying, hey, I want to align with your mission. I want to be intentional about making sure that we're working with Black, businesses to provide this support. We want to be intentional about making sure that we're changing our policies to reflect this. We know that you care about, the environment being sustained. Well, we have this community garden, and the way that we fund it is through this. And so we need your support here. That's going to be really important as it pertains to this enterprise funding model, because it goes a lot deeper, obviously, than that. But it really looks at it from a lens of where are the inequities, and then how do we fill those needs? We're not just looking at, can we fund, programming it's helpful, but it's not necessarily getting at those deep-rooted issues that lie beneath the surface and will continue to be there. If we're kind of just putting a Band-Aid on it, we're not solving the problem. These are the organizations that don't want the Band-Aid. They want to know exactly how are we going to perform surgery? How are we going to remove the things that are poisonous that are impacting us? And that's going to require telling the story a little bit differently than we maybe traditionally would. This nonprofit social enterprise model is really good. I know some organizations were like, we just don't know how to bring in, funding aside from grants and all that to be successful. And the social enterprise model is really a good one. I like this, this graphic here because it shows you that your traditional charities, they're providing funding from grants and donations, endowments. They, and different things like that. They want social value. When you look on this end, we have the traditional business. They care more about the financial value, like what is the return on investment for me? And so we are for us as an organization. So they're doing some good work, but really the bottom line has to match up or else they're not going to do it. They're really focused on profit. The sweet spot here is the social enterprise because they are mission driven. There's a social business. And so with this model, there can be a business that, and it can be operating under a nonprofit, but it's operating. And so there are things, there may be goods that are sold, there's employee training, all of that's provided, and those people become the employees there. They're investing and working with certain people from that community, their businesses and all of that. And so that's something that's really important. And they're looking at that so that they can then feed back into that nonprofit. So they have people that they train, they can then do the work. They're only utilizing, businesses that are from that community. So that's further impacting the community positively. But as they are maybe selling these items, whether it's food, clothing, whatever it is, they're selling those things that they have been trained to work for and produce. But then that money is also going to go back into this nonprofit that's serving the community. And so that nonprofit may be providing, food, and maybe providing clothes for people who need them to get a job. So that's how this is not just focused on grants. It really is a business model that allows you to then support the nonprofit. And it's a very sustainable model. And also it doesn't just target programs. It targets your entire organization and gives you more operating funds, which allows you the flexibility to move as you need to better serve the community, which, as we know, during these times, that's been necessary. Funds were tied to certain activities, but then we're able to move some of those funding around. Maybe it was tied to getting, you know, food or diapers or something. And we know that's still a need, but maybe the people that were coming to our organization during this pandemic really needed help with, you know, transportation, or needed help with housing or something like that. And so if we're able to go back to the funder, which I always say go back to the funder, and have that conversation, we're able to shift that funding. But if you could avoid all of that and have a social enterprise, you have those funds to use as you'd like. So that's really a huge benefit of social enterprise. And it's just something that's sustainable, long-term. This can work and everybody thrives from an economic standpoint. This one, it's not as clear as I wanted it to be, but it basically just says to consider all the costs. So with the for-profits, they're looking at their revenue and their sales and the cost of goods, and then they're looking at their profit and their business expenses. And then they may get to the nonprofit piece. But here with this model, there's the business revenue, there are the subsidies, there's those grants that are coming in. They do have the cost for the services that they're providing and the business cost to operate. They're looking at a profit, but that profit is going directly back into the work that they're doing. So like it says here, like caseworkers, providing the support for, you know, it may not be just goods going out to people, it may be like that human capital. We need caseworkers to make sure people are getting connected to services. We don't have money for those positions, but now because we've got this social enterprise model, we are generating funds and we can hire more staff and meet more of the needs. So it's really a very neat model that's been around for a while, but now it's just getting picked up more and more. And so I just like this graphic just because it kind of pulls it together in a more simple way. And it just shows the public sector and the private sector working together. Civil organizations, I know I mentioned like NAACP is one of them. And then economic development, public sector, nonprofits, social economy businesses, like it's everybody coming together in this one bubble to make an impact on the entire community. And that's something that has not traditionally happened, but we can see significant sustained impact when we operate this way. And there's much more on it on how to do it, but I just wanted to make sure you all were aware of this as an option. I think that's the end. So I would like to open it up for any questions that I might have missed and any thoughts that you guys have.
Will there be some links to some of the other websites that you had mentioned? I tried to capture some of them.
Yes, we will.
So like the collective impact forum, things like that.
So the collective impact, like the model that was shared, and then yes, and then the link to their site where you can learn more. Absolutely, yes.
Thank you so much.
No,
I also
pleasure.
think that with the collective impact model, I believe the TCC group may already be mentioned on the Passport Protected website.
Mm-hmm.
Once we develop the CCAT, and so we will also make sure that those websites are also on there as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? I know that was a lot of information. Definitely want to hear if there, I know we, have about 10 minutes. If there are any thoughts you all have, if anything resonated with you and you're thinking from your organization standpoint where you are, that there could be something else that's helpful, that would be good. Struggle testing innovation.
I did it. Oh, do we just come off mute?
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead. And then I'll answer, I'll respond to Dion's too.
Thank you. I enjoyed the presentation and how not just thorough it was, and anyway, great job. So I had a question about the social enterprise model, because as we were thinking about potentially leaning into that, I also heard from someone that you should be concerned a little bit about if you become too successful in that model, then you're no longer like a nonprofit. I forgot the name of the standard, I think the charity standard, I'm not sure what it's called, but there's a standard for a charity in your 990 that if you're overperforming on that, you could put your nonprofit license or status in jeopardy. Can you speak more about how social enterprises kind of manage that or watch that, or give me a little bit more information about that? I don't really have a really well-formed question, but can you speak more about that, balancing it?
So I won't claim to be an expert in that, because I think that's going to be more of a person who's like on the accounting side and familiar with the nonprofit regulations. And so I have someone who does that for me for my daughter's nonprofit, so I would hate to act like I'm the expert. I would say that it's going to depend on how your nonprofit is set up. And there are different ways to do that. So that's going to be what's critical in determining whether it's sustainable. Because if you think about it, there are plenty of nonprofits that are multi-million-dollar nonprofits. So, you know, a lot of times there's this mentality that a nonprofit has to literally not make profit, but we're better able to serve the more profit we make. So it's really about it being set up the right way. And if it's not initially, then obviously working with someone, whether it's an accountant or an attorney, to be able to ensure that your organization is able to shift to a model that's going to be better suited for that.
Yeah, and I have operated a social enterprise before, and when you have unrelated income, you just pay an unrelated business income tax on those revenues, and that's how the government kind of segregates those revenues, and so that way you protect your nonprofit status. Because you are still paying taxes on those revenues, but your nonprofit revenues are protected.
Thank you, Beth. I appreciate it. And I saw Dion had a comment, and I know Chrissy said the American Red Cross is a social enterprise. I did not know that. And then so Dion was saying that you spoke of testing innovation before investing. In what ways can small nonprofits do this with small budgets and few staff? And so really it's about, you know, I always say taking a phased approach. So maybe there's a larger plan of where we want to go, but we test a part of it. And so it doesn't always have to, I say it doesn't always have to include money, but obviously time is money. So we want to respect that. But sometimes it's saying, what is our capacity right now? And what are we trying to assess? And so from that standpoint, if there's this big, huge project we want to assess, maybe we say we're only going to address this part. At the same time, the organization still may not have the staff capacity. So I always look at, I'm a big proponent for practicum students, bringing them on to support the work because they do have the skill set. So it's not like you're just bringing anybody. They have the skill set and they also are going to be committed. There are some committed volunteers, so I want to say that, but they're more committed sometimes than some of our volunteers because there's an end game for them as well. And then we also have the backing of their educational support to help make sure that we propel this work forward and it's actually structured in a way that benefits the organization. So I know also, I don't know if they're still doing this, but I know SLU School of Public Health has a class that does evaluation and like program development and evaluation. And they often are looking for smaller organizations to support. And I've connected some organizations before. So getting engaged, at least in the St. Louis area in that way would be helpful so that that support does exist. I'm sure there are some other ways, but that's kind of my first thought on that. There's a new message. Oh. Hi, Chrissy. I know you're gonna look great. But yes, no, so I think that, so I think that answers that. Unless Dion, did you have any follow-up to that? How did you feel about that? Okay, good. Well, I think with that, I just wanted to remind everyone that, thank you. Oh, yes, I am related to Bobby Norfolk. Yes, great guy. I wanted to remind everyone about the password protected site. Again, I know that the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization always sends out a really comprehensive email that has this information. It'll have the recording from today. And then there are already some materials for this on the site. We have some more that we would like to add because since we rescheduled, we just decided we would do more work and find other valuable resources. So we'll be providing that as well. And then there will be a survey because I do always like to receive feedback. There's always room for improvement. And we want to know how you felt about this because it's really about you. Remember that on March 9th, I had to make sure I mentioned this, March 9th, there's the capacity building workshop. It's called Nonprofit Governance, Becoming an Exceptional Board on Purpose. And so we will go and dive deeper into that. Yes, Linda.
So, Monique, there's another question in the chat.
Oh, there is. Okay. Okay, let's see. I gotta scroll up. Okay, when you spoke of flat organizational structure, Does that go beyond non-hierarchical decision-making? Is this integrated into the function of the entire organization? Yes, so, essentially, someone has to make the decision, right? So it's not like removing that person as the leader, but it's taking an approach where I'm not just paternalistic in it. I'm actually saying that I need to be well informed from everyone's lens, and then the decision I'm going to make should be reflective of that information that was shared with me. So yes, it's just instead of decisions being top down, now we're taking into account people from all different perspectives that we may not even have considered because their title didn't fit what we thought it should fit. And now we're recognizing there's so much value in every single person in our organization. And so those decisions are going to look very different when we're starting to consider everybody and what their needs are. Again, it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be much better. Okay, 360 evaluations to support evaluations. Awesome, awesome. Oh, and one thing I do want to mention that I know we're getting on pathways, decision-making levels. Okay, we're gonna definitely capture the chat too, so that if there are some resources we can add, we'll do that. But I also wanted to say there's something, when we're thinking about personality assessments with our team, that's something I didn't say. When we're looking at our team, one thing we want to look at is like, we know what we see on the surface, but then there are these assessments we've done and you identify that so-and-so we thought that they were really strong in this area. Maybe they are, but they have another strength that's right beneath there that we didn't consider. And so now you're seeing this because you've done these assessments, and we just did this with an organization and it really went well. And we found out that the administrative assistant had some other strengths, and like she actually needed to be able to manage projects and could do that really well. And that was something that was missing because they didn't know to tap into that. Or like maybe we bump heads because we didn't realize that this mattered to you and this matters to me. And so doing, combining assessments on personalities and strengths really helps, because then it also identifies some gaps. And like maybe we're missing this type of personality and these types of strengths. And so as we're hiring, we're then looking for people that fit that as well. So I just wanted to say that as I saw these assessments, I thought of some of the ones that we've used and we hadn't mentioned. So no, this is great. This is great. I think, I'm going to take this information as promised. The assessments that were mentioned, we'll make sure that people have access to that information. Some cost, some don't, but we definitely make sure you all know about them for sure. And I just thank you all again for allowing me to come before you and you showing up when you can be doing anything else. I appreciate it. Thank you, Linda, Dion. Anything you
And thank you, Monique. It was a great presentation.
Thank you.
See you all next time, hopefully March 9th.
Well, you want to be safe and be careful out there these next couple of days.
Yes, definitely. Bye, everyone.
All right. Have a great day.